Hi, my name is Arjun and welcome to ENERGIZE, the tech revolution. Today we have a very special guest amongst us. Sean Barnes is a seasoned cross-functional leader with over 2 decades of progressive expertise in leadership development, digital strategy, operational excellence, human resources, ESG, and HSE. Driven by a passion to harmonize leadership and operational excellence, he founded WSS Solutions and hosts the Way of the Wolf podcast. Through these platforms, Sean is dedicated to developing exceptional leaders and building high performance teams that consistently surpass expectations. His mission is to empower organizations to achieve sustainable success by fostering a culture of excellence and continuous improvement. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you. It is an absolute honor to be here. I know we had an opportunity to meet at an event that I spoke at a little over a year ago now, and we've talked about it, finally getting our schedules to align, so I'm pumped. I'm really excited for this.
Thank you, Sean. So let us start off by learning a little bit more about your professional journey. You started off, in the energy sector where you held various IT leadership positions before starting your own company. So would love to learn more about your professional journey. What excited you about the energy sector and led you to start your own company?
Okay. Well, so full transparency, the thing that excited me about the energy sector at the time was the opportunity to make money. So I'm just going to go out there and say that. Now, I spent the majority of my life as the introverted IT guy, very focused on how can I understand what's going on with this technology. And I don't know, it was almost like, felt like I had this gift. If it had a current running through it, I could fix it. And so being the introvert and also understanding technology, it made a career in IT a pretty easy decision for me because I was also intrinsically driven to accomplish great things and climb that corporate ladder. And so I spent the first 2 decades of my career in just IT. And in my mid 30s, I started kind of grappling with not being challenged, not having a sense of direction, not knowing what to do. And so I started to seek a challenge. And at first, I would interact with people in operations in the business. Hey, can I help with this? Hey, can I help with this? It was always met with resistance. Now, interesting, the first 4 years of my time at the company that I used to work for, we had 4 VPs of HR come and go. It was just a revolving door. And I think that maybe I might have had a little bit of an ego because we were so good at technology. And I thought, well, I could lead HR. So that took some convincing with the CEO because, as you might imagine, she's like, but you're the IT guy. That doesn't really make any sense. Why would we do that? And that getting into the seat of leading the HR team as well, like that's a whole nother topic. Ultimately, they gave me my shot. I had to come back to the table multiple times, but they finally gave me a shot. And man, that changed the entire trajectory of my life because I could no longer be successful hiding behind my keyboard with the office door closed and the light off and drinking my energy drinks. It wasn't going to work. And so it forced me to develop skills around effective communication and building teams and cultures of performance. And, and I over the first few years, it was very challenging for me, but I developed this passion for building leaders. And then also because of my background, I feel like I was uniquely positioned to understand the data, the logic, the systems, the process. And once I started to understand people and what drives and motivates them and start marrying those two things together, man, there was just this insane acceleration of all things related to my career, the positive impact. And then eventually that company had me start leading safety and transportation and start an ESG function. And because of my passion around leadership development, let me do that. And so very interesting career trajectory because very few people in my experience branch out beyond IT. And after filling all of those roles for a number of years, I felt that I had kind of reached the pinnacle of what I could at that organization. And so last year decided to go out, start my own business, focusing on executive coaching, leadership development, and then also strategic advisory consulting. And so that's really how we support our customers, but then also having the podcast, which is the Way of the Wolf, which it's completely free. I don't monetize it. I just put it out there to share the lessons that I've learned. And so a little bit of a unique story, but I like to kind of unpack that for people just to kind of let them know where I'm at and where I've been.
That's great to hear, Sean. Such an inspirational story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, in terms of your company, WSS Solutions, which you started and you have a podcast show, would love to learn more about your products and services. And are these offered in person or also remotely?
Yeah, so we have two primary verticals that we focus on. One is the coaching, the leadership development, executive coaching, team building vertical. And then we also have the consulting practice. And on our consulting practice, we have a few, we'll say sub verticals, but primarily human resources, information technology, and then business process optimization. Those are kind of the buckets that we focus in on. And I lead all things related to the coaching practice. And then my number two, Crystal, she leads all things related to the consulting practice. And we cross communicate and collaborate on all the things that we're doing. But those are the two primary buckets that we like to focus in based on what we are passionate about and what we believe we are best at.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sean. Now, in terms of your podcast, Way of the Wolf, would love to learn like how long has this podcast been going for and where can viewers and listeners find it?
Yeah, the podcast I started almost 4 years ago now. We just passed 200 episodes recently. And you could just go to thewayofthewolf.com. You can look up the Way of the Wolf podcast on YouTube, or just search Sean Barnes or the Way of the Wolf on Google, and both will pop up. But I started it 4 years ago because, well, for two primary reasons. One, I wanted to share the lessons that I was learning around leadership and building teams. And the other, I was still a bit of an introvert 4 years ago. And a friend, colleague, mentor of mine said, well, if you want to get over that, start a YouTube channel. And I thought, oh my God, why would I do that? And then I started reflecting on it and recognized that that physiological response that I had was exactly the reason why I needed to start the show. So it started as a passion project, just a hobby. And man, it was challenging because I'm sure you're probably aware, like less than 5% of podcasts make it past the 20th episode. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's somewhere in that range because it is a ton of work. You don't get views, like nobody's paying attention except for your mom and her friends, but it was just a grind. And I leave all of my old episodes up because my hope is that I can inspire somebody else who is a bit of an introvert, wanting to grow, wanting to be better, so that they can see, oh wow, 4 years ago Sean sucked. And there's still a lot of room for improvement that I have for myself and the production quality and all of that stuff. But you can see a progression over the past 4 years. And I think it's important for people to understand that you're not going to start a podcast. You're not going to start anything new and come out of the gate and sell your show for $100 million. There's this misconception out there. And what most people don't realize is that it takes years and years to be able to become great at something.
I totally resonate with that sentiment, Sean. Absolutely. So, going forward in our podcast today, we'll focus our conversation on four different categories and we'll dive deep into each of those four categories. Those would be leadership, communication, influence, and workplace culture. So, we can start off with leadership first, Sean. So, firstly, there's a train of thought and a school of thought, Sean, that leadership is something either you're born with or you don't have it. Like, what is your thought process on that? Is leadership something that you can learn?
This question comes up a lot, and I don't know what it was about how you phrased it, but my mind immediately went to early in my career, I had the mindset they were born as a leader. It's so natural to them. They're just gifted. They were made to be a leader. And I also thought there's no way it would ever be me. because I was the introvert, because I was afraid to talk to people. I was shy and quiet and reserved, and all the stories that I was telling myself. And as I look back now and like the nature of my role, my business, my passion, my purpose in life is leadership development and building leaders that can build more leaders. Now, for me, it was about a decade-long journey to figure out my leadership path. But I think ultimately we have to understand that leaders are not born, they are made. They are made through the adversity, through the challenges, and having this relentless focus on becoming better and understanding that they are not there for them. As a leader, you need to espouse a philosophy of I am here to build every person on my team and help them achieve their dreams and goals. And when you do, all ships are going to rise with the tide. You are going to learn. You are going to continue to build everyone on the team. And everyone gets better, but you have to be able to check that ego. And you have to understand that leadership skills, they're difficult to quantify. People think, oh, Sean is a great public speaker. He was gifted with that. Okay. Ultimately, I learned individual skills that helped make me a captivating speaker. I learned how to control pitch and tonality and inflection in my voice. I learned how to use hand gestures to draw people in and captivate an audience. I learned how to hold and maintain eye contact. I learned how to ask the right questions with the people in the audience. Everything that I just mentioned are individual skills that I had to learn and hone. And when you bring all of those things together, all of a sudden, Sean is an effective communicator, a captivating public speaker. But it's difficult to quantify because it's skill on top of skill on top of skill on top of skill. And people think there's no way I can do it. Well, you break it down and start learning individual skills and then start stacking them back up. And that's how you develop these types of skills. And I think it's the same thing for leadership skills. It's delegation, it's communication, it's listening, it's being able to cast your vision and inspire and influence others. Again, all individual skills, but when you stack them, you become an unstoppable leader.
Well, that's great to hear, Sean. You provided such valuable knowledge there. Now, for the viewers and listeners who are watching this episode and who want to really strengthen their leadership skills and they're looking for this step-by-step method approach of building that strong leadership quality in them, would you have any recommendation for them or advice for them?
I think the biggest thing is listening to shows like yours, reading books, watching videos on YouTube, figure out whatever medium makes the most sense and resonates with you because some are auditory learners, some are visual learners, some have to learn through doing. So first, figure out what is the best way for you to learn and then trial and error. It's going to be uncomfortable, but when you hear something, when you see a video, go try it with your peers. Go try it with your team. Go try it with your boss. Woo, leading up the chain of command is always a scary thing to do. When you try it, it's going to be scary. You're stepping out of your comfort zone, trying something new, and then you are going to tell really quickly, was that well received, or did I just fall flat on my face? Make a mental note, and then come back and repeat and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. But you have to be intentional about what am I spending my spare time doing? Am I spending my Sundays watching the football game and then also saying I want to be a vice president or an entrepreneur? That's going to be tough. Or are you going to spend a little bit of extra free time that you do have listening to a podcast, reading a book, being intentional about moving your life in a positive direction? So you have to make the decision, I am going to do this, and then start wrapping some structure around what this looks like and then execute.
Very, very sound advice, Sean. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, there are many individuals who are working in companies, sitting in the corners in cubicles and offices with tremendous amount of talent and potential and leadership ability. Yet the employers fail to recognize their talent and invest in them. What sort of advice would you have for such employers to allow them to successfully recognize talent in these individuals?
There's a very real challenge of undeveloped leaders promoting undeveloped leaders. Undeveloped leaders don't always have the requisite skills necessary to identify talent and then tap into it and unlock it to allow it to accomplish great things. Because the easy path is, oh, I like Bob over here, I'm going to promote him. Well, Bob might be an idiot. We know that. We've seen it. And so I think for leaders, it's important that they understand do I how do I assess the talent, skills, and passions for the people on my team in a completely objective way and understand strengths and weaknesses of where everybody falls. Also, how do I understand enough about the business, the operations, and the needs of the business to say, we have a need over here. Jason, man, he's actually pretty good. He's shown some interest in this. Can we bring these things together? Yeah, I really like Bob, but is Bob the best fit or is Bob just my friend? And so it requires an element of self-awareness that not all leaders have. Okay. Now, I also want, well, as you were talking through that, there was another thing that came to mind. The person who is in the cubicle, who is working frantically, who is solving all of the problems, but operating in the shadows. I think my story is a beautiful example of how stepping out of the shadows can change your life. And I'm not saying for all of the technology focused people that are listening to your show that you have to go start leading human resources, because that almost broke my brain. But find opportunities to solve problems outside of your niche and area of responsibility. If you are a developer, yes, you got to do your day job, you got to develop code, you got to do quality, all the things that you have to do associated with it. But if you see another problem somewhere else in the business, build a relationship with that person and help them solve their problem. Now, what's unfortunate is a lot of people in the cubicles have this mindset, well, that's not my job. They don't pay me to do it. You're right. They don't. But when you do step out and solve Ted's problem and make his life easier, and then you step out and solve Sally's problem, and then you step out and solve Jacob's problem, all of a sudden, you start building a brand and reputation for delivering results and solving other people's problems. They know that it's not your area of responsibility. Bonus, you learn more about the organization and what's going on. You can provide more quality, sound advice to your supervisor and showcase how valuable you are to the organization and open up opportunities for you to do even more.
For sure. That's great. Great advice. Thank you so much, Sean. Now, you mentioned a lot about the do's of leadership. Would love to hear from your perspective. What are the absolute no-nos and don'ts of leadership?
We have all experienced toxic leaders and toxic workplace environments, and a lot of that stems from leaders and or employees that have this just aggressive demeanor. They just come out and think, I'm going to yell, I'm going to scream. They're going to do what I say, just command and conquer mindset. You might achieve some sort of results in the short term, but on a long enough time horizon, all you are going to see is attrition of everybody on your team and an erosion of performance for the team. So it's very unfortunate when that happens. So I think the don't come out yelling, don't come out screaming, don't try to command and conquer from a leadership perspective. And this goes back to the self-awareness thing that a lot of leaders don't have because they're receiving a tremendous amount of pressure from above to deliver results. And if they don't know how to get their team to do it, they get into this increasingly frantic state and they don't know what to do. And they get stretched and stressed out beyond belief. And then they just snap. And full transparency, man. This happened to me about 15 years ago after a year-long data center implementation. It was a $2.5 million project building an entirely new data center environment within a colo. And man, I was just killing myself. 80-hour weeks for almost a year straight. My team, I felt like they were doing nothing. They were coming in, phoning it in, doing their 35, 40-hour weeks, and I was here working 80 hours. And one day I lost it. I snapped. I pulled all of them into the conference room and snapped, and I could look around the room and see all 22 faces just in shock. And while it was happening, I will never forget. I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? And I had to take a time out and said, hey guys, you know what? I'm sorry. Let's step away. Let's come back to this tomorrow. But it was the first and only time I have snapped on my team like that. But we are all human. We are human first and leaders second. But ultimately, make sure that if you start sensing an elevation of your emotions and frustrations, that you find a way to step away so that you don't come across and just blow people up. Because all that does is create fear, and people are not going to get behind you as a leader. And then the other thing is, listen, like if you just ignore the people on your team, they're going to eventually stop talking and it's not going to work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sean. Now let's shift our conversation towards communication. Um, what is your recommendations of how one should communicate in their personal life versus professional life?
Man, that is a great question. So as I think back, I I very much used to have personal Sean and business Sean. Business Sean was all focused on business, serious execution, results. Personal Sean, once I got to know people, because I was an introvert, but once I got to know people, I was a little bit more bubbly and fun and would cut up. And there were a few instances where, like at a company Christmas party, some of my employees or people on my team would be like, who is this guy? Like I don't understand. There's this disconnect here. And in the moment, I didn't think much of it. I just kind of laughed it off. But as I started reflecting, and as I started to understand how important it is for us to build consistency around our personal brand, I came to realize that there has to be continuity. If you are bubbly, fun, exciting in personal life, and then all business and business life, there is inevitably at some point going to be this exchange that's going to confuse people. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, wait, what is the real Sean? Is he being fake or like what's going on? So I think it's important for us to figure out who we are and create that continuity between our personal life and our business life. And again, this comes back to self-awareness. I had to learn this myself. But when you are creating your own personal brand, you have to be consistent. Personal life, business life, and then now we have this other dynamic of the virtual world, your online persona. So personal, business, online. And when you create consistency across all of them, it gives people comfort because there's going to be collaboration and cross connects with the people that interact with you in various capacities, and you want to be consistent.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. Now, what do you say are the complete no-nos and don'ts of communication in a workplace?
From the company's perspective,
From the employee's perspective, the individual's perspective, yeah.
Sorry, real quick. So from the employee's perspective, not the employer, right?
Yes, correct. Correct.
The do's and don'ts. One of the things that's been helpful for me is understanding different personality types, behavioral assessments, Berkman, DISC, TTI, all of these different things. And ultimately, they all serve their own purpose. They all have their strengths and weaknesses and things like that. But what's most important is that you understand that people are different. And I know that's a no duh statement, but follow me through here. If I start to understand Sean is introverted, quiet, shy, reserved, conscientious, data driven, analytical, and Sean starts to interact with somebody who's bubbly, extroverted, outgoing salesperson, I cannot communicate to the salesperson in the same way that I would communicate to someone with my personality type and traits, because there's going to be so much that's lost in communication between the two. When you start to understand that there are different personality types and traits, and then you take it another step further and understand, if I want to communicate to Jeff, the sales director, I need to communicate to him in this way so that he actually hears and understands what I'm saying. And again, this kind of goes back to the conversation of, well, why should I have to tailor my messaging to this other person? Why can't they just get it? Well, I think it goes both ways. Once you build trust between the two people and both sides understand how the other communicates, it's not going to be unicorns and rainbows, but at least you know enough. Because if Sean is communicating with Jeff in a way that Jeff needs to be communicated to, and Jeff is communicating to Sean, or at least attempting to, all of a sudden there is this mutual understanding where you can move things in the right direction. So the biggest thing that I can say is starting to learn more about yourself, your communication styles, and then build skills around how to quickly size up and assess where other people are at and how to communicate to them. I think that's one of the most important things. And then another skill that is, I mean, people talk about it a lot, but even still, I don't think they talk about it enough. And that is just listening. Far too many people talk more than they actually listen. And man, if you just listen intently to understand instead of listening to respond, you will learn something. You will grow. It could shift your perspective and ultimately be better for everyone involved.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. And to end our, segment of communication, for let's say for some candidate who's going to an interview, what are the complete no-nos for the candidate to do in an interview and what they can do to build that rapport and credibility with the hiring manager during the interview in terms
This
of
is a
communication?
great question. Okay, so recently, just in the past few months, I have started doing career transition coaching because unfortunately, there have been a lot of layoffs and terminations that have happened over the past year. And so I've had a lot of conversations with people around what to do, what not to do in interviews. So I'm going to provide a little bit of what to do, what not to do. The big thing that I will say is do your research. Don't show up to the interview and just wing it, because people will know. The hiring manager will know that you have done zero research, that you've just phoned it in. It doesn't matter how smooth of a talker you are. The hiring manager, if somebody comes in and there's the salesman mentality and they just chat it up, have a great conversation, okay, cool. If somebody who's a little bit more introverted comes in, but they have researched the website, they know when the company IPO'd, they know what their revenue is, they know what their business units are, all of a sudden, the candidate is asking meaningful questions to better understand the organization, to better understand, is this a good fit for me as the candidate? And so what you're doing in a very subtle way is shifting the power dynamic where you as the candidate are coming in and saying, is this a good fit for me? I see this, I see this. What are your thoughts on it? And power dynamics are a very real thing, because if you can come in with that mindset and you've done your research, and look, it doesn't take, you can spend an hour and figure out all of this stuff. But if you come in and you've done your research and you are asking meaningful questions and thought-provoking questions that get the manager to think, oh, wow, that's a really good question. All of a sudden, you are viewed as that person or that candidate that can come in and raise the status of the people on the team, as opposed to somebody who's fun and chatty and a funny person. The hiring managers, organizations, they are going to look for somebody to come in and level them up. So that's a big one. The opposite side of that is when you're being interviewed, if they're asking you all the questions and you give one word response, yes, no, oh, this, and you're just kind of, lackadaisical about the whole thing. And then at the end, whenever the hiring manager says, well, do you have any questions? You're like, no, I'm good. All of a sudden the hiring manager is like, all right, whatever. That, they just dismiss you off to the side. And whenever I talk to people, they're like, okay, well, I've sent my resume out to all of these different locations. I've done all of these interviews. So now you're telling me I have to spend an hour preparing for every interview that I go on. Well, yeah. If you don't have a job, your job is literally to get a job. Don't you want to be prepared whenever you go in? And yeah, it's a lot of work, but what else do you have to do? I mean, so go the extra mile, spend a little bit more time researching the company, researching the hiring manager, see what you can find out. Now, you don't want to go too far. Well, I was looking at your Facebook and you got and you went on this vacation. Like, that's a little bit too much. But keep it professional, show interest, ask meaningful questions, and that is going to get you a lot farther.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that great advice, Sean. Now let's shift our conversation towards our next category, which is influence. In the world of, IT and energy tech, there's a lot of cross-functional leadership where you as a cross-functional leader are working with individuals who are not necessarily reporting to you, but you have to
Mhm.
successfully influence them. These are in functional roles such as product manager, program manager, project manager. So what sort of advice would you have for these cross-functional leaders to successfully lead and communicate with, their necessary stakeholders who are not necessarily reporting to them?
I used to have this mindset around leadership where I could only control the people on my team. And yes, that is an accurate assessment. But I also misjudged the amount of influence I would have with peers or even people above me in the chain of command. Once I started to understand the power of influence, everything changed. And you have to lean into, how can I provide value to them? How can I provide value to them with no expectation of anything in return? I am just going above and beyond to help all of my peers. And when you lean into helping all of the people that are at your same level and struggling with different things, they start to trust you more. The more they trust you, the more likely they are going to be to listen to the guidance and advice that you provide to them. I want to share a quick story. So, about 6 years ago, I was a part of an acquisition that was made by the company that I was working for. We had acquired another business. And my role as the PMO leader was to lead all aspects of the integration of the company, not just IT and HR and safety, but supply chain, sales, distribution, like all aspects of it. Now, nobody across any of those teams reported to me. However, I had to move all of them towards this successful integration. And a little ways in, there was one of the leaders on site who was looking to kind of grow into a leadership role at that particular location. And he was talking to me and he's like, I know I can make a positive impact, but these people don't report to me. And, I need to get into this manager role so that I can fix all of this stuff. And I looked at him and I said, we've worked together for about a year now on this integration. Do you feel that I've made a positive impact? And he kind of looked puzzled. Was like, well, yeah, absolutely. And I said, does anybody here report to me? And he paused. It's like, well, no. And I said, it's not about command and control. It's about your ability to inspire and influence and move people in the right direction. You being in this manager position has nothing to do with your ability to affect positive change in the organization. And it was like this light bulb went off while simultaneously crushing his ego. And there was just so many different emotions and thoughts and just a flurry going around his head, because it was like I broke his brain. And far too many people think that I have to command and control to be able to do what needs to be done, but it's not about that. It's about learning how to inspire and influence. Interestingly, those skills about how to inspire and influence are what make you an even stronger leader when you have a team that actually reports into you, because you don't have to lead with the iron fist. All you do is unlock opportunity and let them execute. And yes, you have to set guardrails and coach and guide and mentor, but when you unlock that potential, man, big things happen.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you for sharing that story. Now let's dive into workplace culture. In terms of your perspective, what defines a good workplace culture, and what defines a workplace culture that needs improvement?
I think that hmm, we've all experienced toxic workplace environments. And obviously this is a spectrum, right? It's not, is it toxic, yes or no? It's how toxic is it? If you wake up, if your peers wake up and they are just the thought of coming into work, they just dread it. That's a pretty strong indicator that you have a toxic or unhealthy workplace environment. On the other end of the spectrum, if people wake up and the first thought in their mind is, oh, I want to create this content for the team. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, I just thought of this idea that's going to make our tool better. That is a strong indication of a positive workplace environment and culture. And where I think a lot of companies struggle is bringing talent into the organization that aligns with their mission, vision, purpose, and vision for an actual culture. Because they think, hey, here is my culture. This is what's important to me. This is what we do. Well, we've got this salesperson over here, and man, they bring in a ton of revenue, but every single person in the company hates them. They are just this toxic black hole of suck that makes everybody's life horrible. But man, they bring in the revenue. Most leaders are too afraid to lose that revenue to let that toxic salesperson go so that the team can actually move forward in a positive way. And I've seen this more times than I can count, where you have the toxic salesperson that's just a drain on the organization, or you have the toxic vice president that's just a complete idiot and just messing everything up. And the senior leaders will hang on to them, hang on to them, hang on to them. Everybody else on the team spends all of their time complaining and being frustrated that this problem is not being addressed. And when you finally address the problem and exit that toxic person from the organization, productivity for the rest of the team skyrockets, because all of a sudden they are now focused on achieving results, moving projects forward, instead of complaining about the toxic person over here that was a drain on the organization. And then senior leaders are all of a sudden like, oh man, I wish I would have done that sooner. Well, yeah, The problem really comes when these senior leaders just let it happen over and over and over with new people coming in, and they never learn how to more quickly address and exit that toxicity because they're so desperate for the revenue that they bring in, or they're so desperate for their tacit knowledge around a given tool. So that's the biggest misstep on cultures that I've seen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. Now, for some company who at this current stage is looking to improve their workplace culture, are you able to recommend or advise them on like a step-by-step guide or approach of how they can do that?
It's actually pretty simple, man. Two things: listen and act. Listen to the people on your team because they are in the weeds. They are doing what needs to be done. They know who the toxic person is. Listen to them and act on it. Now, there are some caveats here because if the toxic person is telling you something, but the 15 other people on the team are telling you something different, that means you have to listen to 16 different people and understand what is actually going on. So, I would love to give you this long-winded response, but ultimately listening to the people on your team and then taking action on it. Also, if you can't take action on something for whatever reason, you need to explain why. I hear you. That makes sense. We can't do it right now because XYZ, but we are going to put it on the back burner. We're going to revisit it. Will you remind me next quarter so that we can talk about this again? Because what you don't want to do is listen and then never act on anything and then think it's no point in me actually having a conversation because they never listen. Even if you do hear them, if it just goes by the wayside and then you ignore it, there is a perception of they listen, but they never act. So listening and act, those are the two most important things.
Thank you so much, Sean. And lastly, to end our conversation about workplace culture, a lot of individuals, who are interviewing, and let's say, for example, they're not successful in the interview scenario, a lot of it is the responsibility of the employers to give them some advice of why they did not succeed in the interview. But a lot of the times, these unsuccessful candidates don't get any feedback, and they're not able to grow and learn from the process. Sometimes, they don't get this feedback, and other times they get statements such as, "We don't see you meeting the culture of this organization," or "We don't see you fitting the culture of this organization." Can you break us down what this statement actually means, that we don't see you fitting the culture of this organization?
Where my head goes to is the recruiter or hiring manager is not equipped to have uncomfortable conversations, and that's the easy button. Oh, it's not a good culture. It's not a good fit for the culture. And when you hear that, it can be crushing and demoralizing. And so I think the opportunity here is if you hear that from a hiring manager, if you hear that from a recruiter, just say, you know what? Cool. I completely get it. Is there any feedback that you can provide? Was there something specific that didn't align? Because based on my conversations, I thought it was a good fit. So was there something specific so that as I move forward and interview at other organizations, that just so that I'm aware of it? Because ultimately that feedback is really important to me, and it would mean a lot if you can share that. So what you as the candidate are doing is removing friction and saying, cool, get it, no pressure. If you can just provide me a little bit more clarity so that I can be better, it would mean the world, and I would really appreciate it. So that's how I think you combat or address or handle that situation. If they ghost you, which is also a very real thing, I would encourage you to be consistent, not persistent, consistent with following up with them. Hey, haven't heard anything from you. I was really excited. I thought it went well. Can you provide me just a little bit of feedback? Or even, hey, I have another opportunity over here, and I really enjoyed our conversations and would like to pursue this. But if it's not a good fit, just let me know so that I can kind of pursue this other thing, because I don't want to put them on hold. So there's a few approaches that you can have just to kind of follow up with them if you do get ghosted.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean, for that great advice there. So that concludes the formal portion of our interview for today. We like to end our podcast with a fun segment called a rapid fire, where our viewers and listeners get to learn a little bit more about the personal side of our guests. So, as part of this rapid fire, I'll be asking you three quick questions. So, are you ready?
I am ready.
Great, Sean. So, firstly, as this is a tech podcast, would love to learn what is your favorite app or a hardware product that you enjoy using?
As a as a podcast host, I have started using a tool called Podcast AI. They are a startup, interestingly enough, in Canada. I will get you connected with the CEO or the owner of the company. But they reached out to me at the beginning of this year. Hey, Sean, we've got this new tool that we're launching. I see you've got a podcast. We'd love to kind of work with you on some stuff. And so they demoed the product for me. And it was you upload your audio, it does the show notes for you, it gives you some recommendations on tags, and then it memorizes all aspects of the episode. I was like, all right, cool, yeah, cool, show notes, that's fine. But then they went into this, we'll say chat bot or feature, and you can actually go in, the more episodes you upload into it, somebody can go in and chat with a virtual version of Sean and say, hey, what episode would be best for this, for delegation, or if I'm struggling with communication with my boss, something like that. And the chatbot will respond back, all right, you have my attention. What really blew my mind is it takes audio samples from my episodes, and you can have a virtual conversation or a conversation with a virtual version of Sean, and then actually do an audio conversation. So you type into the chat, what is the best episode for me to talk about this? Hit the speaker, and then all of a sudden it reads back its prompt in my voice, pitch, tonality, inflection, all things. Man, like I would say probably 90% there. I can hear it. People on my team can say, something's not quite right. But for anybody that doesn't know me and has just listened to the show, it was scary. I got goosebumps and I said, okay, take my money. So right now, that is a tool that it's been really helpful for us. We're kind of continuing. Again, it's a startup, but I mean, it's been fantastic to kind of work with. So for any of the people on your show, for yourself, for any listeners, check out Podcast AI or podcast.ai, I think is the domain. But yeah, it's a phenomenal tool.
That's great to hear, Sean. Thank you so much. Secondly, what's been a book that you have read that has had a big impact on your life and why?
Can I list more than one?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So I think as we go through the seasons of our lives, different books have an impact in different capacities for us. A little over a decade ago, Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, just massive impact on taking ownership of all aspects of my life. It was just, I think I read it multiple times. I listened to the audiobook a few times, like massive, massive impact. Recently, a friend of mine, Terry Weaver, he wrote a book. He wrote it a couple of years ago, but it's called Evolution of a Leader. And I'm not saying this just because he's my friend, but that book, I take it with me on all vacations. The way the book is structured, just quick chapters, easy to read, subtle reminders on this, on this, on this, all around leadership, how to become a strong and effective leader. And I legitimately take it with me on trips and vacations. I'll post pictures of it, and the book is all worn out and tattered with notes and all. Like, it is just absolutely phenomenal. It's called Evolution of a Leader by Terry Weaver. I'll send you a link to it, but phenomenal, phenomenal book. Doesn't have, interestingly, doesn't have a ton of sales for how great the book is. But I've read a lot of books in my day, and that one's pretty fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sean. And lastly, do you have any final words of wisdom, perhaps a short story or quote that you'd like to share with members of our audience?
I shared my story of stepping out of my comfort zone in IT and starting to lead in human resources. And that was probably one of the most challenging times in my professional career. And I've experienced a lot of challenges in my professional career. But interestingly, in looking back, it is those challenges, it is that adversity that forged me into a better version of myself. And I learned that even if you ascend to the pinnacle of your technology career, there's only so far that you can go. And when you make the decision to tear yourself down and start at zero in another domain, it is going to be a massive blow to your ego. You're going to question life. Why did I make this decision? It was so dumb. And then you're going to start getting better and more proficient. And it will forge you into an even stronger version of yourself. And I had the opportunity to do that numerous times. IT, HR, safety, transportation, ESG, and then eventually starting my own business. And one of the biggest things that I've learned is it is that adversity that makes us better. Do not be afraid of the challenge. Far too many people see, far too many people allow fear to prevent them from stepping in to their greatness, from achieving the things that they are meant to accomplish. And they know it. They know, I don't know if I should do that. I don't know if I should do that. I do not want to be on my deathbed regretting not having tried. And yeah, it was a blow to my ego starting a podcast with nobody listening for the first year. But interestingly, I started getting better. All of the work that I've put into my professional career, all of the work that I put into my podcast and public speaking, it continues to make me a better version of myself. And we only get one go around here. Why not? Put yourself out there and make the absolute most out of it. And yes, you're going to fall on your face numerous times. That's a good thing. Learn skills around dusting yourself off and continuing to move forward, because one day your story is going to inspire and influence and motivate some young kid that is petrified to talk to anybody, and you're going to change their life without even knowing it.
Thank you so much, Sean, for that. Really appreciate it. So that concludes our rapid fire interview for today. How can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
You can Google Sean Barnes. You can go to wsssolutions.com. I'm actually getting really close. By the time this episode drops, I might have seanbarnes.com, a public speaking website, launched. I'm going to be launching that on December 13th, I think it is. So yeah, you can find me on social media, _Sean Barnes, or just Google Sean Barnes and I'll pop up.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Wishing you the very best in your new launch there. So thank you so much for being on our show today. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure having you. And thank you so much for sharing your subject matter expertise on leadership, communication, influence, workplace culture. From the team at Energize, wishing you and the entire team at WSS Solutions lots of growth and lots of success.
Thank you.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, our episode for today. And remember, you're one product away from transformation. I'm Arjun Chaudhary.